Fitz, you've put $160 billion towards keeping us on the road, despite COVID. On current projections, it will be a decade before we can even dream of a budget being ACDC's Back in Black. Once through COVID, will you and all of us have to tighten our budgetary belts? JF, economic support at crisis levels needed to be wound down, and that is what we've done. We brought JobKeeper and the COVID disaster payments to an end, but were criticized at the time by Anthony Albanese, who wanted to keep the spending taps on. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg with his family. Armao Fitz, you've said, there is no ideology in an economic crisis, and yet when Rudd and Swan also blew out the budget to get us through the GFC, they were bitterly criticized by the coalition. In the Fair Dinkum department, can you not say they did a great job getting us through that, just as the coalition did a great job loosening the purse strings to get us through COVID? JF, well, I think we were rightly critical of the pink bats fiasco and the checks that went to people during the GFC. Whereas, this time, we've had very targeted responses, which has seen Australia's economy outperform all major advanced economies in the world. Fitz, hang on, you say targeted responses, but mobs like Harvey Norman got millions of taxpayer dollars in the very year they had record-breaking profits. That's not very targeted. JF, as I've said many times publicly, businesses who are in a position to pay back JobKeeper should do so. Fitz, have you lifted the phone to Jerry Harvey to say, listen, you bastard, give us the people's money back? JF, he knows where I stand. Fitz, when, in my broad economic illiteracy, I asked Ross Gittins what the key question he'd like to see you answer was, he replied, what is the government doing to ensure wages grow at least as fast as the cost of living is rising and preferably faster? JF, well, the answer to that lies in creating an even tighter labor market. When you've got employers competing for workers, as we're starting to see now, that drives wages growth. Now the cost of living is also a real issue, and so is inflation, but a number of those factors are international ones, including higher petrol prices and freight costs. The key to higher wages is creating more jobs. Fitz, okay, but on the matter of our economic structure, what seems clear to me is that through no virtue of our own, many of those in my lucky generation of baby boomers are a lot richer than both our parents and our children. Is it not, therefore, your job as treasurer to even it out more and tax the baby boomers more heavily in favor of the elderly and young? JF, I've always been in favor of lower taxes, as part of our fiscal strategy. I don't see the path to intergenerational equity through higher taxes. It's not a binary choice. Fitz, I wouldn't know fiscal strategy if it bit me on the bottom. But I get this. Does my lucky generation need to be bitten on the bottom and more heavily taxed, or not, to even things up? JF, no. Fitz, when I interviewed Peter Dutton a month ago, he was honest enough to note that while he was hoping for the best, for the fine Morrison government to win again, blah, if the position of party leader was open after the next election, he would be a starter. You? JF, Peter, to be honest, my focus just over a week out from a pre-election budget is to outline our economic plan and Fitz, and wait. Let me put it in your terms, then. If the worst nightmare comes, and if those incompetent ALP bastards win, led by that mongrel, Albanese, then, yes or no, would you likely be a candidate for the Liberal leadership? JF, ambition is not a crime. But I am fighting to win this election. Fitz, got it. But Minister Dutton also said that if it came to it, and Prime Minister Albanese was pushing Uluru, and he was opposition leader, he might support it. Would you, in the same position? JF, as I said launching Andrew Bragg's book, I think that constitutional recognition is very important, but there is still much work to be done around the detail of the model. I agree with Tony Abbott when he said constitutional recognition of the first Australians would help complete our constitution. Fitz, well, as Bragg pushes Uluru hard in his book, I'll put you down as a yes to Uluru, unless you yell loudly. Meantime, are you a Republican? JF, yes. Fitz, if an Albanese government were to push a Republican referendum, would you support that? JF, you're not getting me on that sticky paper. It's not for me a high priority. I have great admiration for the Queen, a remarkable individual. Fitz, the Financial Review writer Aaron Patrick opined the other day that you and Peter Dutton suffer from the same personality contradiction. Their public and private personas are, to an extent, opposing. Frydenberg can be intense and a little emotional in one-on-one encounters. Dutton is relaxed and warm. Is that you? JF, everyone's entitled to their opinions, but don't believe everything you read. Fitz, sure, but while your public persona is moderate, reports emerge of another side. I was surprised at Simon Holmes' court's unchallenged assertion at the National Press Club that you'd personally called some of the Climate 200 donors to berate them. Josh Frydenberg still enjoys tennis. Eddie Jim JF, everything Simon Holmes' court says after hello should be treated with deep skepticism. I actually think he's a coward. He puts everyone else's name on the ballot box, except his. He looks a little too obsessed. I feel sorry for the guy. Fitz, at the 2019 election, you received the second biggest swing against a sitting Liberal. Tony Abbott received the worst and was booted, and you received the lowest primary the Liberals have ever received in Kooyong. Even the Herald Sun had a headline the other day saying Kooyong isn't safe anymore. How worried are you? JF, last election, I also faced a well-funded independent who fancied themselves. The people of Kooyong said otherwise. This time, I face another so-called independent who is a former long-standing member of the Labour Party. A personal history they sought to hide, but has now been exposed on, dare I say it, the front page of the Herald Sun. Fitz, who's your best mate in politics? JF, Greg Hunt is my closest friend. I was best man at his wedding and he is the godfather to my daughter, and I'm the godfather to his. And Ed Husick is another very good friend of mine across the political aisle. Fitz, do you ever discuss your God and his Allah? JF, not recently, but we do respect each other's religion and recognize the importance of faith. Loading. Fitz, should we be opening up our borders to the Ukrainians the way we did for the Jews of World War II, like your mother? JF, we certainly should be taking Ukrainians within a humanitarian program, and we have already made some announcements about humanitarian assistance to support those refugees who are fleeing across the border. Fitz, would it be fair to say, however, that Australia seems more open-minded about taking Ukrainian refugees than we were about taking Afghan refugees? JF, not at all. We don't discriminate as to where people are fleeing from in a humanitarian crisis. Fitz, last question. Would you rather win Wimbledon 10 times or be Australian Prime Minister? JF, one Wimbledon would be enough, Peter. I might even settle for a French Open. Joke of the week. Once upon a time, a bloke asked a young woman, "Will you marry me?" The young woman said, "No." And the young woman lived happily ever after and went shopping, dancing, drank whole bottles of wine, chatted for hours on the phone to friends, always had a clean house, watched chick flicks without feeling guilty, never had to cook, did whatever the hell she wanted, never argued, didn't get fat, didn't have to pay for dual view TV, traveled more, had a career, had many lovers, didn't save money and had all the hot water to herself. She went to the theater, never watched sports, owned every remote control in the house, never wore frigging lacy lingerie that went up her ass, had high self-esteem, never cried or yelled, and felt and looked fabulous all the time. Tweet of the week, I understand times are hard, but doesn't the president of the #Ukraine own a suit? I don't have much respect for current members of the US Congress either, but I still wouldn't address them wearing a t-shirt. I wouldn't want to disrespect the institution or the United States. US economist Peter Schiff. The reaction was savage. Quotes of the week. The court is unanimous in the view that the duty should not be imposed upon the minister. The three judgments of the court have different emphases as to why this conclusion should be reached. Chief Justice James Alsop in his judgment that the federal environment